and welcome to another episode of All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arper. And before I introduce today's guest, I just wanted to talk to you about mastering the art of compassionate communication and having confidence in conflict resolution. As you know, I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And in the last 7 years, I developed a master training, which is 20 days of intense training with a select group of individuals from all walks of life. If you see yourself as someone who could be the go-to person for this kind of work, then maybe you'd like to get in touch and see if you'd like to be part of the 2027 cohort. You can find me at mariaarper.com. Today's guest is Dr Hussayn Salem, and he is a serial tech entrepreneur who moved into law and then into dispute resolution. And he's going to talk to us about his journey and the development of his project called Project Olive Branch. Thank you. Hussayn, welcome to All Things Conflict. Thank you for making the journey up to Peterborough and sitting in the studio with me. It's really lovely to have you as a guest. And we talked a bit about your background in technology and conflict resolution, dispute resolution. So maybe you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Maria, so much for inviting me down. Lovely Peterborough. Yeah, I'm from the Midlands, so it's nice. I drove down from Manchester. My background. So my background's it's an unusual background, and one of my handles on social media is polymath, or I have a diary of the polymath because it's slightly polymathic. So I trained originally as a clinical scientist in stem cell gene therapy. That led me to spinning a company out from Imperial, getting into the corporate world. And I think throughout that journey, I was involved in many different types of conflicts, it ranging from suppliers and commercial, civil, to shareholder disputes. Every single time, I, for some reason, built a reputation for being able to just sit people down and say, we don't really need to go to court on this. And I think somewhere along COVID time, I retrained in law. So I did my law degree. And again, within that, I found dispute resolution being my home. So I trained as an accredited mediator. That's kind of my background.
Amazing. So you started off as, you're still a scientist, but you started off in... Did you say stem cells?
Stem cell and gene therapy, yeah.
Gene therapy.
I should say, though, Maria, I'm a failed footballer. That's where my career should have gone. I had trials for Leicester City, which is the city I was born in. And yeah, that didn't quite go to plan. So plan B.
Plan B.
And now I'm somewhere on plan F, I think.
Well, yeah. I think that happens to kind of all of us. But maybe we'll come back to the football thing later.
Yeah.
Not that I know anything about football. But, and then you found yourself in the sort of corporate world, and then lots of people arguing and lots of disputes. Wherever you put people, there are going to be arguments. It's just inevitable,
yeah,
especially
absolutely.
in the way we live together. And I love that, that you've built yourself a bit of a reputation for going, we don't really need to go to court here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, sometimes you have these clauses in documents and contracts. I think contracts is a whole different area of an issue for intake for disputes. But yeah, it was just a lot of the time it was just sitting down with people and saying, actually, what are we doing here? And reality checks a lot of the time. Do we really want to go a couple of years into this and this much? So, and I think I was doing mediation work without being an accredited mediator for a number of years, actually not even knowing what mediation was in terms of a definition. Funnily, when I tell people about mediation, they say, I can see that. I can see why you'd be good at meditation.
or medication.
Yeah, or medication. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I noticed there were a couple of things I wanted to ask you. I'm not sure which way to go, so I'll put both on the table. So one would be, can we have a look at like your upbringing and where you might have seen that sort of thing modelled, or whether, within the family. And the other one was, of course, without giving any names or anything away, like, can you remember a time when you thought maybe I'm out of my depth here, and then, made it work? I don't know which direction you'd like to go in.
Yeah. Oh, really interesting. I think possibly upbringing is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I think when we were talking as well, when we first had our chat, I think that was an entire conversation on its own, upbringing, the role of psychology in how people can become good in mediation, or the communication skills.
Yeah.
And I think I've read somewhere the heart and soul of mediation is empathy. And I think somewhere along the lines, being able to be empathetic. So I grew up on a quite rough council estate in Leicester, one of 4 brothers, and everybody always says our family is an anomaly because a lot of people didn't get as fortunate opportunities, and we've all 4 of us did well, but from my friend circle, some struggled, some have not with us today. So seeing that, I think possibly art of communication got me out. That might have been where it started with. So I mastered the use of language quite early on.
So can you give me an example of that, at school, or, getting it out the ghetto kind of thing?
Yeah. It was obviously it was a different time then, but, things as simple as careers advice. I said I'd quite like to get some work experience in a law firm, and they wrote some things down and told me, we've got you with some 2 weeks in a corner shop, and your people from your background are quite well suited for that type of work. And I think I went home, thought about it, went back, and I just articulated why. I think I'd like to get a law firm, and if the school can't facilitate that, then I'm happy to try and do that myself. So I think that was an early example of, I could just throw the dolly at the pram, which I saw other people doing, kind of channeling frustration through anger. But yeah, so I think that's an early example.
It's a really good example because there's a lot in that. As you said, you could have just got angry and made a whole issue out of it, and then not got anywhere. Yeah. But actually, what you did was navigate.
Yeah, I think I like that. Yeah, I navigated. I think, like I said earlier on, one of my my career plan was professional football. Again, I think I got stopped in trials at a point where they effectively said, you're good for your age, for the category, but Asians don't have the right genetics. You eat chapatis and rice, and it's not a good investment. And I actually walked away from that saying I actually appreciated the honesty, to be honest, as opposed to so. Again, that was an early opportunity for me to say, I think possibly then academics is going to be where I've got a better chance then. So again, it's, I think, navigating things and channeling adversity. I experienced quite a lot that early on.
Wow. I mean, I'm sort of, I guess there's a part of me that's speechless at that level of racism thrown at you so directly. And I can relate to that from my upbringing with my Cockney accent, and me knowing that I had more in me than what other people thought I might be capable of.
Right.
Unfortunately, I did go to war with everyone.
Right.
I learned my skills a lot later in life. So that's really interesting. But instead of taking these things to heart, not saying that you didn't take them to heart, but instead of using that as rocket fuel, what you've done is been more considered and actually thought, well, how do I squeeze the best out of what's in front of me?
Yeah. And I think it evolved. So again, part of the journey I explained to you that I went from being in research to spinning a company out was because along the journey, and it's never really been figured out, if I'm really honest, I've kind of just been going and following whatever I get very interested in, which is where I am today. And I'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But, you know, for example, I really wanted, after I graduated from my undergrad, to get onto one of these management training courses and get into biotech. That was what I really wanted to do. And I was told that, you know, it's not really a place for certain demographics. So I think I converted that and I said, I'll just be the CEO of my own company then.
Yeah, exactly.
And for a long time, I was CEO, bottle washer and cleaner all at the same time. But, you know, that did really well. And I think it was driven from, I'll channel that and use communication in a stronger way. I think that's what I've done.
Yeah, I'm really touched by what you're sharing, and that inner strength to say, well, okay, all this tells me is I'm not going to get any help and support.
Right.
That's all it tells me.
Yeah.
So I'll just generate it myself.
Right.
So then you went to become a lawyer.
Yes. So within those conflicts, often lawyers were brought in early, which is, again, I was always secondary to that process where they said, well, lawyers are saying this, let's call Hussayn, let's see what he says. And so I ended up spending a lot of time looking through contracts, understanding dispute resolution, contract law, and I got really interested in various aspects of it because it is a world where it feels like we're taught that you should get first aid training, basic first aid training, for example, but I actually never taught to get legal training, just for your basic rights, basic understanding of things. So I love studying. I'm a serial student, I think they call me, but yeah. So, but I don't do it for the qualification. I do it for the interest, and so I studied law, and yeah. So, and again, that gave me a greater insight into being able to navigate certain situations, and also the reality checking side of things, because it's useful to be able to say, well, actually, I mean, you think that's what your outcome is going to be, but you know, I'm interested in where you got that thought from.
And so, I also, I mean, this is just a kind of guess, really, but I've often thought that when people choose the law, it's because there's something in them that wants to deal with injustice that they've experienced.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the obvious route to get, you know, the whole knowledge is power thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think I've been very touched by your ability to, you know, not to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but to crack the nut with some sort of precision.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, I like that. It's interesting. I'm in mid-40s now, so I look at that situation. You get to you kind of look back and say, actually, what are the themes that have driven me to where I've got to? What were the milestones? Where were the pivots? And I think it's justice. I'm very much an advocate, even if I watch TV movies, or what is it I really like? What books do I really, where there's somebody who gained justice or somebody who's a defender of justice? I really like that. We call it adl in Arabic. And that's all it. And I think it's human nature that we just want. And I think that's why I've gone into mediation rather than litigation, because ultimately that's what we were really thinking about.
Yeah, we're looking for inner peace. And inner peace can be found in many different ways, but without harmony, there's not going to be any inner peace, is there?
No, absolutely.
And so then it seems a shame to use adversarial processes to try and find harmony. I mean, in fact, it's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's defaulted. It's defaulted now into our DNA, I think. That is the only route to gain justice, is to go through an adversarial process.
Well, you're talking my language now, because I feel that we've been using adversarial processes for so long, adversarial and punitive processes for so long, that I think it's actually in the DNA now.
Yes.
So we call it human nature. I don't think it's true human nature.
No.
I think it's an indoctrinated human nature.
Yeah.
and it serves certain what's the word I want to use? Does it serve certain political aims?
Right.
And I don't necessarily just mean politics, the world of politics, but it serves certain political aims to keep people in that state or in those states.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
But it's not who we really are and what we really want.
No, and I think, you know, I guess I talk about it a lot because of, you know, Project Olive Branch, but, you know, I think people wanting to access justice, the first default point is, I mean, you just Google it, like and it's going to be litigation. You know, even when I was, as I said, I retrained into law, you actually learn about ADR as being a formal stream of dispute resolution. But it's that word. I end up staring at that word, alternative.
Alternative, yeah.
Why is alternative? You know, it's almost by default programming you to say it's maybe another option. It's like herbal medicine rather than pharmaceutically and peer-reviewed medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yet it has such high success rates. And we'll come on to all of that. I just still want to stay in your kind of evolution.
Okay, yeah.
I think, because it's, you know, you've obviously got your own sort of unique experiences of how you've dealt with adversity coming your way, and then how you've transformed that, and then gone through the legal world, the world of law, and then sort of realised, well, actually, this doesn't cut it either.
No, yeah, yeah, it is interesting that yeah, I think from that, I mean, again, that evolution, it is about, and I think maybe it's part of my personality is to absorb a lot. You know, in one of the first businesses that we ended up with fundraising, as you do in a tech startup, and I ended up being quite good at fundraising. So a lot of people would call me in to help them. What they don't know is it was about 900 meetings before I got a yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people saying, I don't think it's a good idea if 900 people have said no. No. Just haven't found the right person to back me yet, that's all.
So that takes a certain amount of, so I was going to call it self-belief, but that might sound a bit egotistical.
Yeah.
Because I've also had that kind of knowing. It's a kind of knowing that you can't explain. That even when the world's telling you you can't do this, or you shouldn't do this, or this isn't for you. And I know my early work experiences as a girl with a Cockney accent, and my flat refusal to learn to type, which I always said was the making of me, was refusing to learn to type.
Right.
Because when I went to work in the advertising field, they'd see a woman and they'd go, oh, can you just type up this report? And I'd go, I don't know how to type. I work in production.
Right. Excellent.
Excellent. And so, yeah, oh, can you man reception while the receptionist goes off at lunch break? I wouldn't know how to do that. Sorry, I'm busy doing some artwork, you know.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And so, yeah, I've experienced those things. Is then coming out the other side, isn't it? Coming out the other side and going, well, what? I know that I'm destined to do something else.
Right.
And you also know that if you tell people, they'll laugh at you.
Yes.
I don't know if that resonates.
No, it does. No, it does. It does resonate. And I guess some people have said to me, it's that stubbornness in me. Mm-hmm. That if you say no, that you can't, that's not for you, that's not in your capacity, I will just do it just because to prove I can.
So I don't call that stubbornness.
I mean, I don't call it. Yeah.
I have. What I've said is, you know, I've learnt my skills, I've learnt my craft, I've mastered it. You know, that's pretty much indisputable. And what I say is, then the second skill or the second layer that you can't do it without is perseverance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. You know, again, people call it stubbornness, but again, it comes down to language. You know, we can label lots of things. And I say, in different languages. I use the word love as an example of how language is so powerful. But in English you've got love. You can love your mum, you can love your wife, you can love your daughter. It's the same word. In Turkish, for example, you've got about, I think, 18 different words for the word love. So so stubbornness, I think, is simply, if I had a different word for it, but stubbornness in some ways, and arrogance as well. I think is a very interesting self-belief versus arrogance.
Yeah. How do you? I mean, I don't want to split hairs over words,
no.
But it's about. But it's so important because so many disputes erupt from literally what I believe I said and what you believe you heard.
Right. Yeah.
We often talk about this, the gap between message sent and message received.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably talk about this later, but this is where I think the gap is with AI coming into this field, is that with a certain word, that human element to interpret and contextualize, I don't think there's a fear of AI taking over anything at the moment.
Oh, that's interesting. No, let's go there. Yeah. Talk about AI, because that's where you've gone next, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I give you a really quick, short intro on how it happened. So I went into law. A friend of mine who's a solicitor, he'd just done his accreditation to become a mediator. And he said, "Oh, son, you should be a mediator. I mean, you're already doing it." So I said, "Oh, okay." I looked into it. And like all the training providers, I thought, fabulous, looked into it. It's a certain number of hours, got to give a week of my time and a couple of £1,000 to do that. And there's all these disputes. And I'm going to be really, really busy. And did the training, got really excited, got the certificate, and then nothing. And I didn't know how to access. And that led me into trying to understand. So there was the two of us. I said, why don't we combine efforts, looking at the cost of marketing, the cost of building a website? And it was like, well, it's not justified. It can't spend the amount that you need. And that all led to understanding there was a structural problem, because I couldn't understand if the backlog of cases, especially I do some work with the FMS, the free mediation service at the Royal Courts of Justice, the courts are understanding it post-Churchill. They're all understanding the role and the power of mediation. But you've got all these conflicts that are rising, and you've got all this incredible talent of mediators with their domain experience. No one is alike. And yet it's not being used. It's not being adopted anywhere near enough.
Well, we haven't got people queuing up to become media. I mean, this is a problem that I've been addressing for many years, is we need to build it into the education system. So for a long time, we were putting peer mediation projects into schools,
right,
so that kids can grow up around that. And then perhaps where their parents had really messy adversarial divorces, they might try to do their divorces differently.
Right.
I mean, sorry, that sounds very depressive, but, lots of marriages end in divorce,
for sure.
So let's get real.
Yeah.
The likelihood in a lifetime is you're going to have more than one long-term partner.
Right.
That's a pretty standard now, isn't it? But we're not growing kids up with this, so it's not coming into their culture. But interestingly, I was very touched, because I went into a very troubled school in around 2011, 2012, something like that. School was making headlines, and we trained a group of influential kids to be mediators into school and to take this message into the school. And we did turn things around. And literally earlier this year, I heard from one of those young men saying, I want to come back to my mediation roots. I want to remember. And I've been talking to my employer about it. And I thought, see, that's the longevity of this stuff.
Yeah. I think on the conversation we had, actually, you almost completely reversed my thinking about a lot of this. I felt that mediation's this big solution, and it's actually mid-process. And you mentioned something to me which I went away and really thought about, which is mediation's good, and it's once the conflict's arisen, but actually we need to be teaching the mediation skills to people themselves, to mediate themselves.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, when we had our project in Dartmoor Prison, We were in there for 8 years, so we were training cohorts of prisoners to do mediation and facilitation and to support prisoners who were struggling. With the final cohort that we did after COVID and before the prison closed, they were doing one-to-one sessions with prisoners that were struggling.
Okay.
They actually did 6 sessions with 150 prisoners, one-on-one, over a 6-month period.
Wow.
And then what happened was the team themselves had a little bit of a falling out. And I said, okay, you've got to shut all your casework down. You've got a week. You need to do a process and I'll design the process with you. And the guys turned around and said, we don't know how to mediate because we've never had to use it.
Wow.
They'd literally... But we had 9 guys and they said we haven't had to use it because by doing these one-to-ones and by then bringing people onto trainings and into something that I designed called the self-reflection pack. We've looked, you taught us so long ago, we've forgotten.
How interesting.
Isn't that brilliant?
And I guess that's a model that's translatable.
Yeah,
across,
absolutely. Yeah, completely.
And as you said, maybe schools.
Yeah.
At the earliest point.
Yeah. I went into one school and we taught the students how to be peer mediators so that a school can deal with the low-level disputes by using the students themselves.
Right.
Which then means teachers can do what they've come in to do, which is teach and notice the real safeguarding stuff that they need to have an eye on, not the petty squabbles. And the kids that I trained said, actually, we'd like to do something else with this. Well, all ideas welcome. They said, what we want is when the kids come in year 7 and 8, we want when one of them, does something wrong, comes in wrong uniform, hasn't done their homework, all the low-level stuff, we'd like the teachers to send them to us to do one-to-one so we can find out what's really going on rather than just go straight to punishment.
Right.
Oh, how amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think kids are seeing that now as well more. They see certain types of punishment as purely punitive.
Absolutely.
And what do you learn from that?
There's nothing to learn from it, yeah.
And at that age, they rebel more.
Yeah.
But again, it's that harnessing and directing that rebellious nature into something positive. Because again, they're not taught that either.
So while, I'm a big advocate for mediation, it's still waiting for something to have happened.
Yes,
so
agreed.
It doesn't kick in until something's happened. And I look at businesses and schools and statutory agencies and I say, if you employed somebody who was I don't know what the title is, it could be like head of community relations. Okay. Who was literally just making sure that people were communicating properly and dealing with stuff at a low level. And this is not a HR job.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it isn't tied to people's employability or their employment or their performance.
Yeah.
So you have this other job that's head of community relations or something like that. You would, a lot of things wouldn't get there in the first place.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and I look at, I look at a healthy, growing society as a natural breeding ground for conflict. Conflict drives and it challenges what we think about something. How do we move forward? So, I think that's natural. And part of a new membership where the membership's just tripled, fantastic for that group. Unfortunately, conflicts are going to happen. Yeah. Got new personalities joining the mix and. So I think if you're right, if at that point you were able to resolve it, that would be fabulous. But I guess where we've come at it is it's natural, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's just then how do you mid-process or midstream tackle what could potentially go very adversarial, entrenched views and all the rest.
And escalate,
Escalation, absolutely.
So now you've got Project Olive Branch, which we've alluded to throughout our conversation. And I think this is a great moment for you to talk about that.
Okay, yeah. No, thank you. So Project Olive Branch, which I had to explain to someone, was not an oil refinery for cooking. At a pitch one day, I said, "Oh, this is a tech investment pitch. Why?" Yeah. So no, Project Olive. Hopefully, I thought it was literal in its own name, but
Yeah.
an offering of conciliation. Yeah, it came. The idea was that as I was trying to speak to generate business for myself as a mediator, thinking, oh, it's pretty obvious. Can say what the value is, the success rates of mediation, the cost benefits. It was just doors being shut, or we have our people that we prefer to use, and it was a very strange thing for me coming out. And I like going into things naive, because once you've got a lot of experience of something, you kind of get entrenched as well. And as I've met people in the field, really respected people in the field, they've told me it's not going to work, as saying we've done this before. So I like that. I like being naive about the sector. And as I started talking about it, I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my cohort of people that I trained with, fabulous barristers, some architects, a whole mix of people in there, and asked them, and everyone was saying the same thing: raring to go, but can't get any work, can't even get observations. Which again, no one's ever told you about the challenge of observations. I found one person who was offering, but they're charging fees to do observations.
And just for our listeners, when you train as a mediator, part of completing your training is to go and observe some mediations in action, and that's what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that then allows you to then become a registered member of something like the CMC, for example. Really important that gives confidence to the general public in terms of the quality of training and standing as a mediator. So if I started seeing that there's this great cohort of people, and I'm thinking, surely all you would have to do, because I'm reading some of their resume, just show somebody your resume and they're going to use you. It didn't quite work like that. So that was when we came up with the idea that if we speak to a solicitor's firm, because we're like, where do conflicts generally find themselves landing? It's with solicitors. So that's part of our model, is working with solicitors and giving them a platform. And that's why we moved away, said Project Olive Branch is not a mediation provider service. It is a technology infrastructure play. And what we do is we take away a lot of the difficulties in what makes onboarding of a mediation, because the mediation itself is a relatively straightforward process. It's a dialogue, it's a process. But the pre-mediation, the case management side of it, and more importantly, I found that was a big gap, is some fabulous mediators, but when I speak to a solicitor, that's, well, I already have a civil and commercial mediator. And but that's quite generic. How do you know that they're the right person? Well, if they're not, they'll probably recommend somebody else. So there was no intelligence in the way that things were being done. And from an auditability perspective, I looked at it from the solicitor's perspective, how do they justify how they introduced a mediator to it? Are they simply paying lip service to the pre-protocol action, which is, we engaged one, but it didn't quite work. I found actually most solicitors are positive to introducing mediation as part of litigation, and it might sound like it can't be, because they are potentially looking at billables, and why would they want to end a?
Well, there was a shift, wasn't there? I think there was a shift in litigation of being able to justify the costs, and the costs not exceeding the value of the claim.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a big shift in the rules and the protocols, wasn't it? Because I know I mediated something where one party had already spent 30,000 in legal costs, and the other had spent like 9 in legal costs for something that was about $5,000.
Yeah, I think that was one of my first cases as mediator was a tenancy deposit, and it'd been in 22 months of hearings adjourned. Both sides had spent money on experts photography and it was £1,800. And anyway, it'd gone to the court, and we were part of the free mediation service. And fortunately, the judge said, we have some mediators outside. I'm going to recommend that you go and have them. Please come back and give me some good news. And at the end of it, they walked in really anxious and all of the rest. But by the end of it, they hugged it out. And I don't know how it got to this point. I then realised that the mediation, the solicitors, from the perspective of huge numbers of cases that are simply not economical to be litigated, means that people are not getting access to justice, which is, again, it comes back down to what we talked about earlier. being central to the theme. Why am I really interested in this? Why am I dedicating my time to something? And so I see there is an appetite from solicitors to say they understand that it's loss of goodwill simply to say to somebody. I was speaking to one solicitor and he said that he had a call from somebody asking if they would look at matters, and before he could speak he said, "You're the 100th solicitor that I've called, and each have said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. We have a minimum amount on matters that we would litigate on. Why don't you try so and so? Why don't you Google?" And then he said, I think mediation, and he said, "Look, you're the first solicitor who said mediation might be a better option." And then they, kind of referred to us. But that idea of incoming inquiries, that's where our platform comes in. So that's what Project Olive Branch does. It acts as a triage. I use triage because I'm from a medical background. So I like the concept of, if you go into A&E, you don't simply go to the specialist. You're triaged. It's much more efficient. It makes the process work. It means that you get the needs that you actually do need. And I think that doesn't exist in conflict resolution. There is no triage, and that's effectively what Project Olive Branch is. It's a digital intelligent triage service that works across the board, and it doesn't cannibalize anybody in the industry. We're not replacing directories. We're not replacing accreditation bodies. We're not replacing panels. We're simply saying that there's a process that's missing, and I think that might be part of it. We never pretend to say that we're going to solve why mediation is not mainstream and widely adopted as it should be. But I think it's a big part of the puzzle is if we can triage disputes, and that early part of the process, again, for mediators, huge amount of work in terms of accepting all the content. It might be emails, photos, contracts, etc. Working through those, understanding I'm not an adjudicator. We're not going to be ruling on these matters, but you still have to go through all of that. It'd be useful. So that's what Project Olive Branch effectively triages it, and then intelligently matches it to a database of mediators that have signed up to work with us, so that we're giving them workflow, but they're also being matched to the particularly right cases, so that in the end we get better resolutions.
Nice. Yes, lovely. And you're right, the triage thing is really, really important and missing. It's kind of, what I do now. I used to run a private practice for not just mediation, but family work and for individuals. But now, if people particularly want to see me, what I do is one session, I hear the whole thing, and then I've got pretty good at being able to say, I think this is where the problem lies, or I think this is actually the point of what you're doing. And, now you've got some choices. Okay. And I can recommend people. So, that's, it really is missing. Yeah.
And again, it's using technology, because obviously AI is thrown out there. I mean, I'm almost hesitant to talk about the AI side of what we do, because it's a form of machine learning that takes unstructured large volumes of data and structures it. But it's actually making the human, because I think mediation is always going to be a very human connection. It's empathy. I think I touched on that before, about that. I don't think AI can ever replace. There are conversations about people saying, well, just, ODR in terms of online dispute resolution. But I just don't think we're there yet.
And some things will benefit from that. I mean, some things will benefit from, absolutely. You put in your side of the story and you put in your side of the story, and the machine will come back and say, pay him 50 quid and, and you're done. Yeah. And that, there is a place for that. I've absolutely. Said that, I mean, the work I do is very much about the emotions, the escalation, helping people to look at their own conflict cycles and how they find themselves in these patterns and all of that. But there's definitely a place there's a court hearing coming up. Do you want to sort this out or not? Do you want to just pay some money? It's not about being right or wrong. It's got nothing to do with who did better or who did worse or all the rest of it. We just get the thing to go away today.
Yes.
And there is a place for that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember a case where, one of the parties was full of bluster and, every 5 minutes was packing his briefcase and getting up to walk out, all highly dramatic. But luckily he'd brought his business partner with him. Right. And as he was finally saying, what an insult, and, he was giving it all large. And I looked at the business partner. I said, I just have one last question for you. You're obviously free to go, but we're now arguing over £1,500. And I'm just thinking, in 6 months' time, how much money are you going to waste putting all your evidence together, preparing for that court hearing?
Right.
And she actually grabbed him by the arm and sat him down and
Right.
said, "We're settling this."
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, that's it.
That's what was needed.
Yeah. Because I've often, when I'm talking about it, I always think I like going back in history. I think history just repeats itself. But that's how I see it anyway. Is conflicts were resolved in villages by going to the elders, being sat down. We're going to work it out, and it's a bit of a negotiation. Not saying eye for an eye. In those days, that was the conflict resolution. We've evolved since then, but that effectively what it was. And I think
there was a in the UK. I don't know. I'm not very good at history, but at some point in history, there was like a roving judge who rode into town on horseback, and then everyone gathered in the town hall or the village hall, and he would just listen to it all and say, right,
And what's fascinating about that is, across cultures, it was the same.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you look at history, whichever period and whichever country or continent, with all the different customs and cultures, that part of resolving conflict seems to be the same. We go to the village elders, they sit us down, we talk it out, and obviously serious things like crime or murder, that was adjudicated upon, but otherwise it was just, what is it?
Yeah.
Settle it. Good? Yeah? Right, get on with your life. Happy. Shake hands.
Absolutely.
And we've gone somewhere along the way we ended up going into adversarial processes.
And could we ever see a time when, it's been a real evolution for me, but a time when humans can, or we could sit down and say, "Oh, look, we're disagreeing. Isn't that amazing? What an opportunity to have a conversation."
Yeah. The question is, can we? I mean, we went through the Industrial Revolution. I think we're going through what some people call the cognitive revolution.
Right.
And the cognitive revolution means that we will be thinking about things more. And I think we potentially could do. I think it will come down to schemes like you've suggested, where we teach people themselves the mediation skills as early as possible, and make it almost standard curriculum type education. For sure, I think we can. But as I say, I think that element of sitting down with somebody who has some skills or wisdom, as it was in the old days, the village elders, as I call it, that just seems to have never really gone away as being a winning solution.
Yeah, except that in the work that I was doing with gangs, what I found was that because we moved to this adversarial thing, when I was working in communities, the people that help resolve conflicts don't have job titles.
Right.
They're somebody's auntie. They're
Right.
not, head of community safety sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
And the problem that I found was that, I've got beef with, someone over there, and I go and I gossip about it to my auntie, or, the hairdresser or the barber, or, whoever it is. And what I found was the advice they were giving me would be only in my interest,
Right.
and to the detriment of the other person, not deliberately,
Right.
but just not thinking it through.
Right.
Saying, well, should do this and you should do that, not thinking, but that's going to be to the detriment. So they're also talking to their tribe, who are also saying. And so I realised that what we needed to do was bring all of those people
interesting
into a training room, into a community space,
right,
and say, when you're advising people, when people come to you, what they really want is empathy. They don't want you to tell them what to do.
Right.
Because actually, when you tell people what to do, you're actually giving them a very powerful message, which is, I don't believe or trust that you're good enough to know how to sort this out.
Oh, interesting.
It's taking people's agency away.
Yeah, okay.
And their confidence. And actually what we want to do is to help people to see what are their options, what are the consequences. Yes, of course you could go over there with a sledgehammer and smash all their windows.
Right.
Of course that's a possibility.
Right.
And what do you think happens next?
Right. How interesting.
And so that's what we did in the London Borough of Brent for 3 years. We just brought community into these community spaces and just trained them. And by the end of the 2 days, it was 2 days at a time, people were talking. We only did first names, so no one know all job titles at the door, everything.
Right.
And then people were using these skills with each other, and you'd end up having 100 people doing a whole community mediation.
Right.
Because they got all this stuff off their chest.
Right.
And what they got back was empathy.
Right. How interesting. And I think we mentioned earlier, I think the heart and soul of mediation is empathy.
It is empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's worrying to me. I suppose that's something that comes up when you, of course, you mention AI, and then, you know, everyone starts trembling.
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue, is that, you know, AI cannot generate empathy with the energy and frequency that is such an important part of the giving and receiving. There's a lot that's unspoken, but it can generate a kind of mock empathy using, you know, learned language. And it sort of, I suppose it bothers me that we may have generations that are going to go in that route, and that's their experience of it, which doesn't touch the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a question that was raised to me about the use of AI, and somebody said, well, your triage effectively, they tried to simplify it.
Yeah.
I think it was slightly being disingenuous, but anyway, I entertained it and said, I don't really understand the value of the platform when I've got my own AI agent and I can simply put my problem in.
Yeah. From your point of view, with all your biases.
And then I put it in and it will find me the right mediator. Why do I need yours? I already pay £18 a month for ChatGPT. And it's the neutrality of it.
Yeah.
And it's what you said in terms of what happens in real life. It's going to tell you what you need to hear. And that's not useful. It's taking agency away from you.
Well, and also, you see, you can't necessarily, I think what the importance is that you need all parts of it.
Yes.
You know, if I just say, well, I've got an argument going with this supplier or this, you know, band member or, you know, whatever it is, it can't give you, because it needs to see what's happening over there and over there.
Absolutely.
What it needs to look at the whole environment.
Yes.
Because what I think the problem is might not necessarily be the problem.
Yeah. And I think one of the bottlenecks we're seeing is we would be approached by somebody saying, I think somebody's recommended I try mediation. So we're like, fabulous, great. Have the other party agreed to? I'm not speaking to them.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, I found that in that entire area within the triage system that we offer, we contact the other party to say that we don't represent this party. We're completely neutral. Yeah. If you're interested, and we tell them the benefits of it and what can come out of it. And then the mediator that's selected, again, has not been selected by represented side. Well, you've picked someone who's going to favour you. Even though as a mediator, we know we're unbiased, we know we're neutral. But from I guess the optics of it from the other party is, well, that they're going to be favouring you. And I see that's why I see mediation has failed with things like NHS resolutions, because if you've got this mediation service available, but you're employed by, or HR, as you mentioned, you know, the HR, I see many HR people being trained as mediators, but then go back to the company. Well, it's not neutral.
Yeah, so I do train people in mediation skills within organisations, but I always say you can't call yourself a mediator because you've got a stake in it.
Okay.
But what you're doing is you're using these skills to de-escalate and take things as far as you possibly can.
Okay.
And I think that's really important. But whatever you do not call yourself a mediator when you've actually got a stake in the outcome, even if that is because you're employed by the same company that's paying your wages, you know.
Yeah.
So I have seen that work.
Okay.
But not.
But again, I think what you're saying is that the teaching the skills for the individual,
Yeah.
but as a process,
As a leader,
Yeah.
so as a leader or a line manager or somebody within an organisation
Absolutely.
to be able to use these skills.
Yeah.
We're having huge successes with the companies that, bring this on board.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, I think that's part of what we're saying, is that if a mediator is required, they are calling themselves mediators. But as you said, don't call yourself a mediator because you have a stake in it.
Yeah.
As a HR professional.
But I want to go back to, that big point about saying, has the other side engaged? And that was kind of our claim to fame. Was what we did was we took 50 cases over a year and we used the dialogue roadmap, which is that tool I've created. And a big part of it was engaging the other side. Because, half the work is
getting them to the table.
Getting people to the table.
Right.
Because the big lie of the industry is, while it is true that 7 out of 10 or even 8 out of 10 cases settle at the joint meeting, less than 30% of anything that ever could be a case ever gets there.
Right.
For all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a big one. Again, I see the conflicts arrive. They arrive at the solicitor's firm. I see many solicitors, including my co-founder, who's a solicitor who was trained as a mediator.
Yeah.
But then matters are being represented, not neutral.
Yeah.
So can't help. So this is why I think that the way our service works is we partner with firms, we give them that opportunity, and it becomes a profit center. So there is fees to be earned for the firm, and they're offering structured mediation pathway, as opposed to informal referral to somebody I know as matters. So that's why I think it works as an ecosystem, because there's money to be made within the system. It's providing a valuable service back into society, and it's bringing a huge industry that's currently sitting somewhere. I get really frustrated when I meet some brilliant people. I was a mediator.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not be a mediator? Do you unregister yourself? No, I didn't get enough cases, so I've gone back to my main day job.
Well, it's another thing I talk about. There are plenty of mediation training organisations that will take your money off you.
Yes.
But, in the end, it's not like training to be a plumber. Everyone needs a plumber,
Right.
and anyone that lives in a house knows that they're going to need a plumber at some point, or runs a building. So you only have to run an ad saying I'm a plumber and get a few good references, and you're away.
Right.
But people aren't looking for mediators.
No, they're not. No, they literally go into solicitors and they think they need that.
Yeah.
And for the solicitors themselves, as I say, if it's an uneconomic or high emotion, they are trained to be thinking about billables. They're not trained to deal with that high level of emotion or unbillable inquiry. So they either just ignore it, divert it away. And again, what we find is that where matters then do mediate, there's additional work, or that client felt so good about that firm saying, thank you for not, taking me down litigation route and charging me 40k on a 5k invoice, that I'll use you for other services.
Yeah.
So it is quite holistic in the sense that that's how I think Project Olive Branch is hoping to roll itself out.
Yeah, and I've certainly come across some amazing law firms that have really bought into this, and as you said, and then the client becomes loyal as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think otherwise, if someone says, I'll litigate on this, I'll need 10k on account for, the unpaid 5k invoice.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work.
Yeah. Amazing. So what's next for you, and for, how do you see this all developing?
So so there's two main parts. One, because there is the AI element and we want to be able to train the model behind it. We're doing a number of co-pilots, and we are inviting as many different law firms as possible to work with us as a co-pilot to show how it can work as a structured pathway service. Something that, the way I explain it, is this is unlike other technologies which law firms have to invest into and have a capex expenditure, zero capital expenditure for them, and they almost build overnight a profit center within the firm. They're offering a really important, valuable service which is being not mandated per se, but you can see it's coming into more mainstream I think the three big rulings that came in with the civil procedure rules, the financial cost awards, and now I think that what will happen, post Churchill as well. Firms will need to know how to do this in a way that is structured, even if they say, I recommend we try mediation because it's pre-protocol action. So that's the co-pilots. That's next. Embedment into the infrastructure is our really big angle that we want to go, because it's not a feature play. I think tech firms in AI right now, if you are building, this is our features, you'll be finished tomorrow. I think for our perspective, we talk about AI almost as if it is there, but it's about embedding this as infrastructure, so we can triage conflict and find its appropriate route. Some things will have to go to litigation, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There will always be some things that need to go, but most things can be people can sit down and talk it through. Yeah.
And then from solicitors, then again, where we'd like to go is into the larger multinational organisations, or even the public sector like the NHS itself, and say, actually, we can provide a really valuable service. The statistic that worried me the most, it frightened me the most about the NHS is the NHS will spend about 3.5% on legal costs over the actual amount that's being disputed, because they just entrench themselves. So early triage of that issue and just finding a way to say, what is it that the person wants? Often just an apology from...
Well, that's a whole nother podcast, Hussayn, honestly, around, the first thing people want is honesty. Yeah. Like, just tell the truth.
Tell the truth, yeah.
But of course, how can you if there's an insurance company sitting behind you saying, well, obviously insurance companies don't tell people to lie, but they don't, but you can't take liability.
Yeah. Do not accept liability.
Yeah. That's, you can't say sorry. So people want absolutely the truth. Like, why has this happened? What went on that I can't see?
Right.
I mean, interestingly enough, not in HS, but we did have a guest on, and her son died in a fight. And the guy pleaded guilty, so she never got to see a trial, so she never got to find out what went on. And then people want to know, is there any remorse? Are you going to apologise for the mistakes? And then how do we stop this happening to anyone else? What are the lessons learned?
Right.
And, unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often as it could or should.
And it's a very human thing to do. Right?
Absolutely.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
But when you live in a punitive system, why would you admit to anything?
No, agreed. Agreed.
It's a Marshall Rosenberg, who's a creator of nonviolent communication and was actually my teacher. He said, I'm surprised every human being in the Western world doesn't walk around with a lawyer attached to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think with the AI lawyers coming out, I think we will almost have that.
There is an app called something like Something Shield. Have you seen
there's
it?
Harvey now.
Oh, is there?
Which is and I think in a couple of weeks ago, I think two AI powered law firms have been SRA approved.
Wow.
So it is an interesting time.
So actually what we could end up with is you and I have a dispute and I'll give it to my AI and you give it to your AI and we'll just go and get on with our lives. The AI can have the fight on our behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. And filing the forms. No, and I think that's again where I say from our perspective, I think we're advocating that human service is still there. We're advocating for almost creating a whole new industry in the sense of mediations, kind of disparate and sporadic. It's not really an industry per se, apart from the training side of it.
Well, I mean, if you go back to when mediation first arrived in the UK, the legal side of it sort of came from America under this alternative dispute resolution. Yeah. Which actually I've got a good friend of mine who said that when it first came in, they called it awful drop in revenue.
Oh, right.
And
I like that. Yeah, I'm going to borrow that one.
Borrow that one. And then it also, the community side came in from the Quakers. It was a Quaker process because they're natural peacemakers.
Yes.
And the community side was more about learning the lessons, not repeating the behaviour, connecting as humans, because usually it didn't have money, wasn't the resolution.
Right.
Dignity, respect, all of those things were more about the resolution. And in fact, actually, there used to be, before the equalities, what's the Equalities Commission, is it called?
Yeah.
There used to be the Disability Rights Organisation. They were all separate. You had race and disability. They were all separate departments. And the Disability Rights government organisation used to pay for a conciliation service.
Okay.
So when somebody complained that they'd been mistreated in a shop or a business or at work, what first thing that would kick in is approaching the business owner or employer and saying, what we'd like you to do is sit down with this person with disabilities and have a conversation to understand. And that got scrapped.
Right. Crazy.
We have actually, in the time I've been doing this work, taken a step backwards.
Have we? Yeah.
So there were 200 community mediation services in the UK.
Wow.
All lost funding.
All gone?
There are a few,
Right.
a handful left that are, properly funded. The Metropolitan Police used to have a restorative justice department. All gone.
Gone. Right.
The Disability Rights Commission used to have a conciliation service. So we have actually gone backwards.
Have we?
And we've more focused on mediation as a way of disposing of things quickly,
right,
rather than the humanity and the community relationship part of this.
And probably those statistics like, 8 in 10 will be is the reason why we use it as a quick fix.
Yeah. So this has been a really interesting conversation. Is there anything you want to leave us with? And then I've got a kind of last question for you, but is there anything you want to leave us with?
Yeah, so what I think what I'd like to leave with in terms of when people think about AI in legal and in this case in alternative dispute resolution is not to be afraid of technology. And I like the very famous quote from the Marvel Spider-Man. I hope I don't get sued for using the copyright, but the quote is with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's how we should view AI. It is a great power, and if it's used responsibly, it can do wonders for us. And I think that access to justice is what drives us at Project Olive Branch. And I think justice is that act of restoration for people. That's what they want. We talked about it in many different ways. And so what we're looking for is to work with as many law firms as possible to adopt this and it integrates very naturally into workflows. So it's not, like many technologies at law firms, it's not going to integrate and it's going to cause disruption to our workflows. So that's what we're hoping for next. Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation, especially weaving in and out of all the different things you've done. I doubt if you're going back to football now, though.
No, well, I still play, but my son's probably more likely to go into
So I have a last question, which is something I've asked, most guests in this series. And it is, if you were handed the keys to the Ministry of Justice immediately, and tomorrow morning you could make one change straight away, what would it be?
Yeah, great question. And I probably may have an answer for that. I think it might be self-serving in this sense, but I think that the concept of pre-protocol action, it needs to be mandated, that people try mediation before a claim is even considered to be filed. That's the first thing I would absolutely do.
Totally. Well, I would agree with you, wouldn't I? But and I heard a really great quote actually, which was, because a lot of people say, oh no, mediation has to be voluntary. It has to be voluntary. And what I heard was there's a difference between coercing people into mediation and coercing people in mediation.
Right. Yeah. Nice.
And I'm all for coercing people into mediation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I just think the voluntary element of that is the process is voluntary, but to go into the process, it's not the same thing. But
absolutely.
That's what you said, yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And I'm I'm still sitting with your early experiences of racism, and I'm really sorry that you had to go through that, and yet probably drove you in many ways.
But it's given me a great view on the world. I was talking to somebody about this earlier, but that you react one of two ways, where you become maybe unconsciously biased towards something that doesn't go your way. It's been racism, and you pull the race card. I've gone the other way. I just see it as part of human nature, but I see it as that society has evolved, and it's continuing to evolve, even though we see heightened tensions. We won't go into politics now, but let's not do that. But I think it's a better place than it was, and it's getting better.
What a lovely view. Thank you so much, Hussayn. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much, Maria. Appreciate it.